My sister fell into addiction and abandoned her child. I chose to adopt my nephew despite family judgment. I, a 28 female, work as a product manager for a software firm, primarily remotely. I've created a life that I'm actually satisfied with. I've never desired children, and it's become a source of contention with my family. If you were at our annual family reunion last weekend, you'd think I was a bad guy for not having children or devoting my life to chasing them. Family reunions are meant to be enjoyable, right? A time to gather up with family, eat too much food, and perhaps giggle at embarrassing childhood memories. Well, mine was more of an endurance test. The tension was palpable from the moment I walked into the house, the covert glances exchanged between aunts, the overly broad smiles, and the loaded questions. Everything was there. I had hardly hung up my coat when the first jab was delivered. "You're still single, huh?" My cousin Patricia. 35F spoke loudly enough for the entire room to hear Patricia, who has 3 children and always writes about them on social media, was holding court in the kitchen, displaying her youngest, most recent school photos. Must be good to have so much free time. What are you even doing with yourself? I smiled nicely and shrugged it off because what is the point of participating? But it did not end there. Another relative joined in, discussing how their lives truly began after having children. Then someone else inquired, "Have you ever considered adoption?" I mean, it's not too late, but it's more difficult as you get older. It was as if they had planned this routine, an organized ambush aimed to make me feel insignificant. They said it all with fox sweetness, as if they were attempting to assist, but the verdict was as apparent as the lemonade on the table. Even my mother joined in quietly, saying that I was wasting my prime years and that every woman should experience the joy of parenthood. My father nodded in agreement, adding that they would have liked to have more grandchildren. I tried to divert by highlighting my work accomplishments and hobbies, but it didn't help. My accomplishments were never taken seriously. Here, they only valued diapers, report cards, and family Christmas photos. At some time, the conversation turned to my younger sister Lauren growing up. She was the golden child, beautiful, charming, and always the center of attention. Lauren was in the spotlight whenever there was one, but everything changed when she got pregnant at 21, dropped out of college, and became associated with the wrong crowd. Addiction followed, as did a series of poor decisions. She eventually withdrew from our lives completely. I last saw her years ago during a court-mandated family therapy session that concluded with her storming out. Nobody had heard from her since, when Lauren's name came up, the room became quieter. It was as if everyone agreed not to linger on it for too long. My aunt casually added that Lauren's son Jake was now in foster care. She spoke it as if she were discussing the weather, detached, easygoing, and without passion. I froze for a while, trying to digest what I just heard. Jake. I had never met him, but I knew he was around 10 years. Years old, he was living with Lauren and one of her boyfriends. When I last heard from him, apparently, that did not last. What do you mean? He's in foster care. I asked my aunt, shrugged. You know how Lauren is. Her decisions caught up with her poor kid. What can you do? I looked around the room, hoping for someone to say something. Anything, but they all continued their talks. It was as if Jake did not exist. I pressed my parents about it, but they dismissed me. You wouldn't understand. My mother replied, it's not that simple. The remainder of the evening was a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about Jake, a 10-year-old youngster abandoned by his mother and rejected by those who should have cared for him. And here they were lecturing me on duty and family values. When I came home that night, I couldn't put it down. I started exploring, attempting to learn everything I could about Jake. It didn't take long to get some information. I'd been in the system for a while, moving between families. The more I read, the angrier I became. How could my family simply pretend he did not exist? How could they sit around judging me and ignore a youngster in need? The next morning, I called a social worker and inquired about Jake's status. It was not a decision I took lightly. I knew it would be complex and messy, but I couldn't bear the thought of him being forgotten. If my family does not stand up, perhaps I can. This was not about demonstrating something to anyone. It wasn't about deflecting their criticism or making myself feel better. It was about Jake, a child who deserved better than the hand he was dealt. I wasn't about to let him fall between the gaps. I spent the next day making calls and figuring out how to meet Jake. The social worker I spoke with informed me that Jake had been in foster care for several years. He'd been transferred between families and reportedly had behavioral issues. When I inquired what that meant, she referenced difficulty adjusting, acting out, and suffering at school. It did not surprise me. How could a child go through what he did without having some scars? The social worker was wary about allowing me to visit him. She said that Jake had trust issues and that meeting new people could be intimidating for him. But upon learning that I was a family member, albeit a minor blip in Jake's life, she consented to arrange a supervised visit. She advised me to control my expectations. A week later, I arrived at the foster care center for the meeting. My palms were moist and I was constantly adjusting my backpack strap. I didn't know what I was getting into. The social worker brought me into a small room with mismatched furnishings and colorful peeling paint. Jake sat at a table and drew on a sheet of paper. His hair was scruffy and he appeared considerably smaller than I had imagined for a 10-year-old. He didn't look up as I stepped in. I sat across from him, unsure what to say. The social worker introduced me as his aunt. Jake returned his attention to his sketch after a fleeting peek at me. His shoulders were slumped and he held the pencil hard. I did not want to push him, so I simply commented on his drawing. He was drawing a robot, detailed and exact. When I complimented it, he murmured thanks but continued working. The initial meeting was quiet and unpleasant, but I felt an attraction to him that I couldn't explain. He didn't trust me. Why would he? But I knew I wanted to return. When I told my family about the visit, it went about as well as one would imagine. My mother rolled her eyes and told me I was overly theatrical. My father scoffed and said I was playing hero. My cousins laughed and joked about how much I would regret it. It's ain't, but that didn't matter. I was not doing this for them. I returned to see Jake several times during the next 2 weeks. He was always guarded, but he began to open up. I took him a sketchbook on one of our visits, and his face lit up for the first time. He adored drawing robots, spaceships, and superheroes. He was also skilled at it. When I asked him about his favorite movies, he ran off a litany of animated films. I made a mental note to watch them later so I would have something to discuss with him. He gradually began to share small aspects of his life. He told me about his mother, how she used to sing to him when he was younger, how she smelled like strawberries, and how she stopped coming up when he needed her the most. It was painful to hear, yet I did not intervene. I let him speak. I had no illusions about how difficult the adoption process would be. When I decided to begin the paperwork alone was daunting, and the system was designed to filter out anyone who wasn't completely dedicated. Some of my friends were supportive. While others raised eyebrows, they reminded me that Jake arrived with baggage and asked if I was prepared for the responsibilities. It did not change my mind, but it made me reflect on how unprepared I felt my folks were. Furious when they found out, they accused me of insulting the family and heaping further humiliation on them. My mother even accused me of stealing Lauren's child, which was ludicrous, given how they had wiped their hands of him. After one too many arguments, I stopped returning their calls. Fortunately, not everyone was against me. I had a handful of close friends help me set up Jake's room. We painted the walls of gentle blue, installed shelving for his sketchbooks, and added a little desk where he could draw. I wanted him to feel like he had his own space, even if he wasn't living with me yet. During one visit, Jake told me that he had been bullied in foster care. The other kids taunted him for not having a real family. I could see how much that affected him, even though he tried not to show it. I promised myself I'd modify it. He deserved to feel protected, and wanted the process stalled when the agency requested family differences. My parents refused to vouch for me, claiming I was unfit to raise a child. It felt like a hit in the belly. But I didn't let that stop me. I discovered coworkers and friends who were more than happy to support me. The custody court is planned for next month. So I've been preparing in my spare time. The social worker cautioned me that these hearings may be intense. They examine every element of your life to see whether you are suitable to be a parent. My remote work position turned out to be a benefit. They appreciated that I had a flexible schedule to fulfill Jake's requirements. Jake stayed with me for the first time. Overnight yesterday. I was nervous, maybe more than he was. I had packed the fridge with snacks that I thought kids would enjoy and purchased extra blankets in case he became cold. He arrived carrying his sketchbook, which seemed to be his security blanket. We attempted making pancakes for dinner because he remarked he'd never done it before. It was a total disaster. The batter got everywhere on the ceiling. Don't ask on. Our shirts and somehow in my hair. But then something incredible occurred. Jake laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a true gut laugh. It was the first time I'd heard him actually laugh, and it made the entire disaster worthwhile later that night. While I was tucking him in an entirely new experience for me, he asked if he might hang glow in the dark stars from the ceiling in case I stay again. He explained quietly. My heart almost burst after he went to sleep. I sat in the living room and cried. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears, fearful tears all at once. The most unusual element has been adjusting to video conversations with my team while having indications of kid life in the background. During today's morning stand-up, my supervisor discovered a half-finished robot drawing pin to my wall when I told her about Jake. Her entire face brightened up. It turns out her child is also interested in robots. She offered to link Jake to some online art programs. My cousin Patricia has been circulating tales in the family group chat about how I'm not mother material and that this is simply one of my phases. I exited the discussion. Anna, another relative I've never been very close to, shocked me with a private message. She expressed her admiration for what I was doing and offered to help. She has taught art to children of Jake's age. Before the social worker came by today to check on Jake's room setting, she saw that the art materials were organized by type and color, Jake's system, not mine, and commented on how he's already personalizing the area. She also added that his current foster home said he's been more involved and communicative since our visits began last night. Jake showed me a drawing he had been working on. It was unlike his typical robots and spacecraft. This one featured two folks sitting at a table eating pancakes. That's us, he remarked before abruptly changing the subject. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom so he wouldn't see me cry again. The most difficult thing has been dealing with my parents. Silence, they have not spoken to me since I legally began the adoption process. Dad did pass by my house. Once I noticed his automobile slowing down, but he did not stop. Mom blocked me on Facebook after I shared a photo of Jake's painting desk. Their rejection hurts. But seeing Jake slowly emerge from his shell reminds me why I'm doing this tomorrow. We have another meeting with the adoption counselor. Jake requested if he might bring his sketchbook and show her his progress. The counselor believes art therapy could be useful for him, and I agree for the time being. I'm taking things slowly, attempting to build trust and stability. Some days are more difficult than others, yet they all feel right in some way. Update. Number 2. The home inspection was more thorough than I anticipated last week. The social worker called the planet, and everything in my flat seemed inadequate. I spent days childproofing, corners changing furniture, and triple-checking every possible safety concern. I also reconfigured all of my business cords to avoid tripping during the inspection. She spotted Jake's artwork conspicuously displayed in what was once my home office, and is now his art room. She paused briefly in front of his most recent work. A realistic picture of a futuristic city. She smiled and remarked, "He's going to feel at home here." Those words had a different impact than any family acceptance could. The financial hardship has been real. However, my savings have been depleted due to legal bills, home improvements, and preparing Jake's place. I canceled my gym membership and began meal preparation instead of buying takeout. Every spare dime goes towards making this happen. My startup's HR department astonished me by giving adoption aid benefits. I had had no idea we had them. Then came the shocking news: my parents had filed a legal objection to the adoption. They wrote a letter to the court stating, "I'm mentally unstable." In using Jake to prove a point, the claims were ludicrous. They dubbed me a workaholic who can't even take care of a plant. I had to engage a lawyer to refute their accusations. Anna really stepped up. She submitted a compelling letter to the court praising my character and dedication to Jacob. She also recounted how the family had previously failed him, which allegedly caused a disturbance at the last family gathering. I was not invited. Jake has been asking questions regarding the process yesterday. He asked whether he could keep his last name or if he had to take mine. The idea that he's thinking about these details causes my heart to accelerate. I told him it was his decision. He nodded and returned to drawing, but I could tell he was processing it. The court date is scheduled for next month. My lawyer believes we have a good case, especially because none of my family members who opposed the adoption attempted to help Jake themselves still. The wait is nerve-wracking. Jake picks up on my nervousness, so I've been trying to keep optimistic around him on a more positive note. His art instructor, contacted me about entering one of his pieces in a school exhibition. Jake was hesitant at first, but after I showed him some famous robot art online, he became enthusiastic about the concept. It would be his first time displaying his work in public. I have to remember that, despite all of the legal battles and family drama, this is about providing Jake with stability and love. Sometimes when I watch him engrossed in his art, finally feeling safe enough to create freely, I know deep down that this is right update. 3 Life with Jake has settled into a new normal, albeit not without its problems. The most difficult part has been establishing routines which his prior foster family struggled with. We work together to design a weekly timetable that includes plenty of time for art. Getting him up for school remains a daily battle. Who knew 10-year-olds could be so clever in their excuses? But we are making progress. The school situation has been difficult. Jake's teacher called me in for a meeting last week. His math and science grades could be improved, but that wasn't her main concern. She noted that he becomes exceedingly anxious during parent-teacher conferences, or when other students discuss their families during the latest family tree project, he shut down and refused to cooperate. I've been working with Jake's school counselor to assist him handle these situations. We're working on alternate projects that honor diverse types of families. His art instructor has been especially helpful, allowing him to stay in the art room during lunchtime when he requires a peaceful environment. She describes his technical abilities as excellent for his age, particularly his perspective. Sketching the custody hearing last week was very stressful. I was unprepared for how personal the inquiries would become. They inquired about everything from my work schedule to my personal life, hoping to evaluate whether I could create a stable environment. When they questioned my decision to adopt as a single parent, I held firm. I mentioned how my remote work flexibility allows me to spend more time with Jake than in many traditional family situations in terms of work. My staff has been remarkably understanding during a recent video call. Jake broke down in the background because he couldn't find his favorite sketching pencil instead of becoming annoyed. My coworkers shared their own parenting disaster experiences, following that one person sent Jake a professional art supply kit. Mrs. Thompson, my neighbor, provided the biggest surprise. She's been teaching art at the local community center for 30 years and offered Jake private lesson. He was first cautious about working with someone new, but when he saw her studio, which was filled with sculptures and paintings, his eyes lit up. It has now become a weekly routine. Last night, we had our first significant breakthrough. Jake was working on a new drawing, darker than his typical work. When I inquired, he finally opened up about his time in the system. He talked about feeling like he was always moving and how he stopped unpacking his bags at new places because he knew he wouldn't remain long. He handed me a little sketchbook. He had H-packed with drawings of the many rooms he had slept in. Some postings occurred just a few days apart. The conversation was difficult but important. We ended up sitting on the floor of his art room till late, looking at his drawings and telling me stories about each location. Some made him giggle while others made him quiet. When he came to the drawing of his present room, I saw it was more detailed than the others I like. Drawing this one, he told me, because I'm not scared to remember it. We are still working on his trust difficulties. He occasionally hoards food in his room, a behavior he developed during more unstable times instead of confronting him about it. I purchased a little refrigerator and assisted him in organizing his snack hoard. Small steps, but they matter. The familial drama continues to emerge. My aunt sent me a passive-aggressive email about real parenting and how I'm playing house. I didn't react, but Jake overheard me discussing it this morning. I discovered a drawing on my desk depicting a superhero version of myself blocking lightning bolts with an arch shield. It made me laugh and cry. Simultaneously, update 4 Lauren showed up to my door. Uninvited yesterday, I hadn't seen her in 3 years and scarcely recognized her. She requested to see Jake, stating that she had gotten clean and was ready to be a mother again when I explained that unexpected visits were not permitted. Under our current arrangement, she became hostile, accusing me of taking her son. The confrontation turned ugly. Lauren began screaming about her maternal rights, which drew the attention of neighbors. Mrs. Thompson, bless her, just happened to be walking by. She hurriedly whisked Jake, who was happily in his art room with headphones on, into her house before he could see anything. Lauren refused to go, so I had to contact the cops after they escorted her away. Discovered she had also been bothering my parents, demanding they fix this. It appears she has been sleeping at a halfway home downtown. My mother called for the first time in months not to encourage me, but to recommend that I consider Lauren's feelings. I hung up. Jake's therapist planned an emergency session following the incident we've been working through. His feelings around Lauren's reappearance. He's puzzled, angry, and mostly afraid. He asked me if he needed to go back to her when I assured him that he didn't. He showed me a drawing. He'd been working on a fortress with numerous locks and security systems. The symbolism was not subtle. My counsel has been wonderful throughout this. She assisted me in filing a restraining order against Lauren and is currently attempting to limit any future contact to monitored visits only. The court seems sympathetic. Particularly after Lauren's outburst at my house, the family has separated into two factions. Most people still agree with Lauren, alleging that I am depriving a mother of her kid. But a few people, including Anna and surprise one of my older uncles, have begun to come up about Lauren's history of desertion. The family group chat has devolved into a battle zone. Jake's art teacher suggested submitting his fortress artwork to a child art competition centered on emotional expression. She sees it as an outlet for him to express his emotions. Art. Jake agreed but asked that the drawing be modified first. He put a figure to the top of the fortress. Someone maintaining watch when I asked about it, he simply replied, "That's you. Work has been my refuge through it all." My staff has been extremely accommodating, allowing me to adapt my schedule as needed for legal meetings and treatment visits. My manager even connected me to another colleague who had gone through a similar adoption process. Their guidance has proven useful. Jake and Lauren had their first supervised video call today. It was brief and awkward. He showed her some of his most recent artwork, but her attempts to reminisce about their time together just made him withdraw. Later, he spent hours in his art room creating robot armies. The therapist claims that this is his way of protecting himself. I've begun chronicling everything. Every interaction with Lauren, every family message, and every event. My lawyer believes it's critical for retaining custody. It can feel weird at times to keep track of my own family's attempts to undermine Jake's stability. The most difficult thing is watching Jake battle with conflicting loyalties. He shouldn't have to deal with this much intricacy at his age. But yesterday, when he asked whether he could start calling me Mom, I learned that family can be established in the midst of chaos. Update 5. Jake's art teacher entered one of his works into a regional competition without notifying him. He won first place when she mentioned it in class. The other students applauded the tournament organizers, intended to highlight his work in a special assembly and give him an award. Jake was scared to speak in front of everyone, but he was determined to do it the morning of the assembly. He donned the button-up shirt we had chosen. Jointly fidgeting with its sleeves when they announced his name, he approached the podium, clutching his latest sketchbook. His voice shook at first, but it strengthened as he spoke. Art allows me to say things that I cannot say aloud. It makes me feel less alone. The scene was ideal until Lauren emerged in the back of the auditorium. I saw her first. She appeared unstable and disturbed before I could intercede. She began making her way to the platform, calling Jake's name. The school security responded immediately, but not before she yelled allegations about me wrecking their family. Jake froze on stage, his words forgotten. I approached him just as his art instructor was taking him away from the pandemonium. Later, in the stillness of his art room, he worked discreetly on a new piece, a dark, swirling composition that revealed much about his emotional state. That incident was the final straw. Lauren's behavior at school served as evidence in the subsequent emergency court session to get a permanent restraining order. The judge also granted my request to limit her interaction to written communication, which would be reviewed by Jake's therapist. My parents' reactions were predictable. They bombarded social media with posts about how I'd manipulated the system and stolen Jake from his real family, but their campaign failed spectacularly when Anna intervened. She shared a thorough narrative of how the family had ignored Jake's demands for years, including screenshots of ear messages dismissing his predicament. The truth quickly spread throughout our neighborhood. Other parents at Jake's school began sharing anecdotes about how he had helped their children feel more confidence in their own artwork. His art teacher documented his improvement and the great impact he made on other children. Even my company's CEO, who had met Jake during our virtual Bring Your Kid to Work Day, sent a public statement of support. We conducted an art display in our backyard yesterday, which was Jake's idea. He invited his pals from school neighbors and even some of his former foster brothers. The theme was building new worlds, which is his specialty as guests pass through the improvised gallery. I noticed Jake confidently explaining his artwork, which would have been inconceivable. A year ago, Mrs. Thompson assisted him in organizing the pieces chronologically, beginning with his early robot sketches and progressing to his most recent works. The development was striking, from hard mechanical forms to more fluid emotional compositions. His most recent drawing, which was prominently displayed, depicted a group of people making something together. "It's about choosing your family," he told the tourists. My parents drove past during the show but did not stop. "It does not hurt anymore. We've created something stronger than their judgment. A family defined by choice rather than obligation." Jake's most recent school report demonstrates development in all subjects, and his art portfolio has been accepted into a prominent summer program. The fortress drawing that created so much turmoil is now displayed in our living room. Jake recently added windows, gardens, and open gates. "It's still strong," he explained, "but it's also a home tonight." As I went through congratulator notes from the art show, Jake glanced up and stated, "I never have to pack up my art supplies anymore." It wasn't only about the goods, we both knew it. It was about finding a sense of belonging and establishing roots. Our family may not look like what my parents had envisioned, but it is real in our own. Every drawing on our walls represents a piece of our story. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.